territory and ancestral lands of the Tiatonte, Atawalaran, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe peoples. We also acknowledge that various municipalities within the County of Dufferin reside within the treaty lands named under the Haldimand Deed of 1784 and two of the Williams Treaties of 1818, Treaty 18, the Nottawasaga Purchase, and Treaty 19, the Ajanasi Treaty. These traditional territories upon which we live and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. It is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection with Indigenous peoples, with this land, its waterways, and resources. And if we could do the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Garretts?
Present.
Councillor Hall is absent. Warden Horner?
Present.
Councillor Mills is absent. Councillor Solomon?
Present.
Councillor Taylor?
Present.
Councillor White provided notice. And Chair Creelman.
Present, and I think Councillor Mills is running late.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Members are free to declare pecuniary interest on any items at this point or at any point in the course of the meeting, followed up in writing with the clerk. Do we have any questions submitted? Seeing none, I don't believe we have any delegations or presentations today. So the first item on the agenda is the first quarter procurement report, and I will call on Amy to elaborate. I think it's fairly straightforward.
Through you, Chair, yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward as well. It's kind of light because it's the first quarter. I would expect it to pick up further in the year. Any questions?
Any questions? Todd?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, I know that we go through these things and we look at it and it feels like a rubber stamp and it's light and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's really important that we continue to have this document on. Like, people always tend to wonder when you glaze over it, or are you actually viewing it? Is it worthwhile to put the time in? I think it is, and I love seeing the scorecard of where we are, and I just wanted to offer that because we're going to go over this quickly. I don't have any questions, but I just think it's important it's there and appreciate the work that's being done.
Well, and also procurement policies have become a little bit more interesting and controversial in light of the situation with the states and with regard to thresholds for staff discretion in other jurisdictions. So I think it's important that it's out there. So I have a recommendation that the report of the Manager of Corporate Finance, Treasurer, and Procurement Manager report, Corporate Services -2025 -001, first quarter procurement report dated March 27th, 2025, be received. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Taylor moves, seconded by Councillor Garretts. Any opposed to the motion? And that motion is carried. Next item on the agenda is the Learning and Organizational Development Strategy. And Rohan, I'll introduce you to take us through this.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, the report is pretty straightforward. Just really wanted to take the opportunity to highlight, demonstrate the learning and organizational plan that we've put together for the organization. When we think about learning and development within the broader talent attraction, talent retention perspective, some of the major components to that: compensation, flexible hybrid work, remote work, workplace culture, and learning and development. These are some of the really big components. And so, you know, as we're, like most municipalities are in competition for talent, it would be wise that we have a comprehensive learning and development strategy that we're able to initiate and implement to really to support our talent attraction as well as talent retention. So that's really what grounds us in pulling this strategy together. And I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Rohan on his report? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Thompson, I love the report. I guess we've had discussions before in previous meetings about initiatives that are brought forth. And I'll be honest, like where I'm going to focus today is on the management level again. I think from any organization, when you've got the senior team setting the the strategies and the initiatives that you're doing, and then it comes down to the management level to run them, there's inconsistencies because now the management level there's a larger array of people and how they would deal with things and what their personalities are. And you talk about defining the core competencies and whatnot, but I think what we're doing here is great. I think it's necessary work, but it's confusing to me because in the past you've said that you wouldn't run the programs. Like, we had education sessions for middle managers, and I asked you, will the managers have to take these programs? And you said no, they were voluntary, that we would do them. And now we're going to implement this in a more formal way, which I think we should do. But I'm just curious, how is that driving? Are you like what made the change happen where you're going to drive this with the management level and make it mandatory?
So, through you, Chair, before I respond to the question, are you able to provide clarity around the trainings that you're referring to in regards to mandatory and non-mandatory? Because we've had a mix of trainings for staff, some of which have been mandatory for management, and some of which that have not been mandatory for management. And this strategy is focused on all staff. So if you're able to provide clarity, I'll better be able to answer the question.
Yeah, so kind of, Rohan, and I apologize, but we did this in the last 90 days, and I asked the question, would you be driving it down to the management level? And it was no, it was voluntary at the time. And I went on my same soapbox and said, oh, it's so important that we have the management level driving it through to the staff, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, right? Like we all sit here, but it's at that level. So I apologize, I can't remember the exact thing, but it was relatively recent. Let me change my focus, because I'm not trying to take you on. What I'm trying to say is I agree with what you've got here, and I think it's excellent. And I just really want to make sure that we're putting these. We talk about the tactics and increasing the capacities of current leaders in this report. And I just want to reaffirm my support for that. And I think it's important that it be mandatory and that these manager levels follow through on them.
Yeah, no, thank you for the clarification through you, Chair. What else? So there are a number of, as folks can see, there are a number of components to the strategy. When it comes to like capacity building and such, there'll be a mix of mandatory and voluntary, whether that be for people leaders or managers or individual contributors or frontline staff, right? And so there will definitely be mandatory pieces, and there will be some components that are voluntary. The strategy itself doesn't outline all of the particular capacity building components and what will be mandatory and what won't be mandatory, because in one of the first area of focus in the strategy, there still needs to be a comprehensive assessment across all of the departments and all of the divisions around not only corporate mandatory and voluntary, but departmentally and divisionally, what is mandatory and voluntary within those particular areas. And so there's an assessment component there. So we still have more work to do, but there are definite mandatory pieces for management. Yeah.
My position with management is that we seem to talk about new managers, and why I'm sensitive to it is because now I'm an older manager. I've managed people for 30 years. And we always say, oh, new managers, and it's so difficult to go from doing to kind of overseeing and mentoring. It's a huge step for people. But guess what? The 54-year-old cat also needs mentoring and help because maybe I've developed bad habits. Maybe I think I'm amazing and I'm absolutely horrible at it. One of the hardest things to do is to manage people. And I just would suggest that anytime there's some sort of extra program available, that we should be pushing it down on people and making it mandatory for manager level people to take that, because they're truly the drivers of culture within the organization. And then I have follow-ups on the PIP process as well.
Yeah, so just to that, through you, Chair, to that question, to this point, all of the mandatory trainings that we've done for people leaders or managers, we do not differentiate if somebody's a new manager or has more experience being a manager. It's those mandatory pieces for managers are just for all people leaders.
Any other questions? Janet?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Rohan. I was really pleased to see the updating and standardizing that you're going to do with the onboarding, because I think that really sets a tone for new employees that we are attracting. And I thought that strengthening that was really good. Number 3, you talk about increasing leadership capacity and developing talent. And I guess not everybody wants to be a leader. And we've got a lot of people within the organization who never want to be a manager or a leader of people. And so I know we're focusing this leadership capacity as certain key individuals. But what are we doing for the rank and file that just want to do their job and do it well? And how are we encouraging them to be better and stay motivated?
Thank you. Great question. Three. I'm trying to make sure I follow the rules. Right? Through you, Chair. So right now, so what we have one of the things that we have in place right now is from a learning on demand perspective on our SharePoint site, we do have a repository of trainings, and it is divided up for leaders and people leaders. All folks have access to those, but it's curated for people leaders, and then there's another section that's curated for individual contributors or frontline staff. And so there are opportunities for folks who still just want to grow their learning, but aren't necessarily interested in leadership per se. And as we continue to sort of grow and implement the strategy as is, it's not going to be exclusively sort of focused on leader and leadership development. There is capacity building. And if I can just go a little bit further, as we go through a current process right now, speaking to folks across the organization in regard to the staff engagement survey results, one of the things that have come out clear are opportunities for learning or job shadowing or secondments, not necessarily for the sake of moving into management, but just experiencing a new role. So those are things that first we need to get more information on internally, but those are pieces that we're hoping that we're looking to be able to offer and implement to some form or fashion in the future. Does that kind of answer the question?
So within this, you do have continuous improvement for individuals,
Yeah.
do you?
Yeah. So one of the areas of focus is expand learning options and improve access, right? So that would be an area for. So as we're thinking about capacity building, not just for leadership, that would be an area.
Councillor Chen.
And so, and the one other thing that I touched on, and I do want to come back, and I hope it sort of answers the question a little bit. You know, in the first area of focus of the strategy, we indicate that we want to align learning strategy around organizational needs. And so that's that departmental assessment around all the within a particular department and within each division, what are those learning needs? And not all of it is going to be centered around leadership. And so once we have a better sense of those, then we're able to better curate the training and development. Some of that is will be mandatory in the sense of recertifications, ministry requirements, those sorts of things, right? So that is very much part of the strategy as well, and it's one of our first areas of focus. Does that address? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, just before I recognize you again, are there any other members of the committee who have any questions? I have one very quick one, Rohan, and that is, what is the take-up on our voluntary opportunities? Is there a way of expressing it in terms of percentage of employees, or are they well subscribed to?
Through you, Chair. At this point, we, from a data collection perspective, we actually don't have the tools to say what is the percentage of the organization around volunteer learning opportunities, who attends or who takes those up.
Okay. Your sense?
When we have volunteer learning opportunities, in my perspective, we do have a good turnout for folks. So for example, any of the sort of live keynotes, workshops, those sorts of things, it's normal for us to have 50, 60 folks who join those. So yeah, and they tend to be good turnouts, and it's not only a good turnout, but if folks can think back a little bit to the equity activity report that got submitted, I believe it was in December, we also provided sort of the participant sort of satisfaction surveys, and overwhelmingly the response to those surveys in terms of how people enjoyed them and what they thought of those were typically at the high end of the spectrum. So we know that we do have a good turnout, and how people experience those volunteer opportunities, they tend to score high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Todd?
Two questions, and I'll get off the floor. So one is on the PIP process. I thought that maybe a better way to put it is what is the process we have now? Because it sounds like the way I'm reading it is the PIP process is new, but surely we would have some sort of process now. And then my second question is, the way the phasing works on goal 3.1, like my urgency, I think, would be on identifying the gaps and implementing learning solutions. And why I suggest that is, and I'll bring it to what I'm familiar with in my day job. We would look around at the management level, and you would know, oh, there's an inspirational leader. There's someone who's new in their career. There's someone that probably shouldn't have the role. There's someone that needs help maybe in developing their skill sets. Like surely HR would know who the strong managers are and who they aren't. Would you expedite something to help them now and get them through, or do we wait? Do we need to wait for 2026? So it's the PIP process. What do we do now? And wouldn't HR know who those people are and implement early?
Yeah. So sorry, my apologies. So from a performance and improvement perspective, so we do have a policy and a procedure around performance development and performance improvement. If folks will remember, we did a revision of our performance and development program. We felt it needed a refresh. So we revised that about a year or so ago and had it implemented. So we just passed our 1-year anniversary of that. So the performance improvement program, we felt as though that needed a refresh as well. And so we're getting ready to roll that out to the organization here in 2025. It's also just thinking about capacity and how much people can sort of take on in addition to their work, because there's a lot of socialization and coaching to what the new process and such will be. So the performance, and we do have a performance improvement program on the books. What we've done is revised it and enhanced it so it's more up to date. Yeah. And then the second question was in regards to sort of 3.1, the leadership development programs.
Yeah, specifically as it relates to the bottom portion. So it's the leadership development program for current leaders, identify gaps and implement learning solutions. Again, I would know in my work who would need help and who wouldn't, and wouldn't we expedite the process, or would we wait till 2026?
So as far as leadership development programs, what I would say to that is all of the mandatory training that we've done for leaders is leadership development. We do have a specific leadership development program that will be tied to our core competencies, and so that is something that we're hoping to be able to roll out. If it's not in 2025, it'll be early 2026. But sort of order of operations is the development of the core competencies to make sure that we're training people accordingly on the things that we say that they need to be. They have to have a high competency in or high capacity in. So it's an order of operations discussion at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's also important to note that we have monthly meetings with all of our managers. We call them managers' town halls, and they're really meant to be learning opportunities from a couple of different perspectives. One, to learn about what's going on across the organization so that each department sort of knows what the other one is doing. One, to learn about policy. Second, to learn about policy changes. So, for example, we had one yesterday afternoon, and Michelle and Rebecca did a great presentation on the upcoming changes to the council structure so that all managers are aware and they understand. So different aspects of policy. And then a member of Rohan's team, Raquel, who actually wrote the learning and development policy, she did an overview of the policy so that all managers are aware of how that policy is going to work. In addition to that, we're this year introducing some external, more formal learning opportunities to that manager's town hall. And this year we have planned a session on conflict communications for managers, emotional intelligence, and what was the other one? And coaching, another one on coaching. So those are upcoming in 2025. Those are already planned. They're part of that manager's town hall structure. And then these other programs, these more formal, in-depth learning programs, as we structure those, will be rolled out either at the end of this year or next year, as Rohan suggested.
Just say the three that you just mentioned, like, I love that. I think that exactly is spot on, and people don't realize how hard it is to be in those roles and having people feed into you in that way, and you need help. So exactly what you just described is wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, I have a motion that the report of the Director of People and Equity report titled People and Equity 2025-004 Learning Organizational Development Strategy 2025 to 2028 dated March 27th, 2025 be received. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Garrett's moves, seconded by Councillor Horner. Anything further? Any opposed? And that motion is carried. So the next item is also a report of the Director of People and Equity. Over to you, Rohan. Yes, a Human Resources Activity Report. My apologies.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, the report is pretty straightforward. We just wanted to take the opportunity to provide council with some key metrics or key data points from a human resources perspective. Just a couple of things that I do want to sort of point out. Give me 1 second here. The report takes a look at a number of things, but one of which, a couple of which I think are important to note is around the number of projects that the team had completed in 2024, the retirement forecast component. Many organizations, many municipalities are going to have to come to grips with and deal with, I guess what they call the silver tsunami, where there's people are going to be eligible for retirement in the very near future, and so the county is no different. One sort of point to around short-term disability claims and what are some of the primary drivers of folks there, with mental health being one of the number one drivers, and that's very consistent across many municipalities. And then also want to point out our employee turnover data. And of note there, just want to point out that when we look at what the data says across Canada and as well as the province, we can see that the most recently in 2023, a 15% for voluntary turnover and 4.6 for involuntary turnover. That's across the country, and so the county's voluntary and involuntary turnover rates are closely aligned provincially and nationally, right? So I just thought that those were a couple of pieces that I just want to sort of point out to folks, but happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments? Councillor Taylor.
Everybody's going to ask, then I will. The average age is listed as 43. Is that good or bad, or I wouldn't know if that's old or young, or we're concerned. That's one question. The tenure per department is also of interest to me. Is that good or bad? Like, for example, the office of the CAO is just over 8 years. I think the continuity piece is probably good, but I'm not sure where we're going. And then the last piece is, it talks about the amount of time that people, the reasons why people are off. And I'm just quickly looking to get to that page. And it speaks to the diagnostic categories of 2024 and mentions mental disorders. Mental disorders is the highest one at 26%. Is that due to just our world and that's kind of what's happening in the world, or is the county high in that way? Like, are we having a disproportionate amount of time away because of strain and stress? Or, like, I'm always trying to ground it in, are we good or are we bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening here? And so all my questions, I guess, are the same along the lines of, are we good or are we bad? Is that a concerning number? Because just in isolation, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Yeah, so good question. I'll try to work my way backwards. So around the short-term disability claim, so we work with a third-party provider, AGS, and so they provide us with these data points as well as the benchmarking. And so, this is a question that we ask AGS, and so in terms of the rate and in terms of the ranking, we're keeping in line with sort of industry standard as a whole, right? So we're pretty much on par with other municipalities of different size, right? On that note.
But is that a sectoral thing? Are municipalities higher than the average Canadian, or is that right? Are we in line?
Well, in terms of what does the municipal sector rank against, say, the private sector, that's something that I'd have to look to see if AGS is able to provide us with that information.
Just interesting. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know, but
Yeah.
again, is it stressful to work at the county and 26% are off or on anxiety or issues, or is it like, that's the ultimate question. Do we have an issue here, I guess, is the question.
Well, when I look at the data point and again, in relation to the benchmarking, so across municipalities of similar size, we're pretty much on par. What we see sort of globally is a rise in issues around mental health. Some of that is attributed to the destigmatization of folks being able to say that they're having mental health issues versus just pushing through, so to speak. Another contributor to that, these are all external contributors that we really don't have any control over. We're still dealing with the fallout of COVID, economic instability and the like, right? So these are all things that are contributing to those things. Workplace culture is always a consideration around those things. So it's a combination of internal and external factors. But again, what I would say is from a benchmarking perspective, across municipalities of similar size, we are on par. I can always look into what does that look like compared to the private sector. No.
Thank you for that. Again,
Yeah.
it was just trying to, what
Yeah.
I was trying to get at is,
Yeah.
is there a problem at Dufferin County and that's high? And it sounds like you're saying it's not. It's not a,
Yeah.
we're totally on par and
Yeah.
we're treating our people well and they're happy to be here and
Yeah.
that's
No.
what's happening in society today.
Yeah. So with that being said, we're always wanting to. The county is committed to helping to address and improve folks' overall experience. So hopefully it mitigates any mental health issues that work is having. And so a couple of things that I'll point to. One is our enhanced benefits that council approved back in 2024. So folks have increased access to mental health supports. And then our corporate strategy, our equity strategic plan, much of those things really add up to creating a workplace that has enhanced psychological safety. So this is ongoing work that we continue to do to try to improve and mitigate what we're seeing as far as mental health pieces. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so for both of those, I don't know if I have an answer to say if those are good or bad. We didn't do a benchmarking piece for these with other municipalities, so I'm happy to look back and go back and have to get more information on that for you.
Councillor Horner, did you?
My question's about musculoskeletal and connective tissue, which is number 2.
Yeah.
And again, this would say to me that there are some instances where we do not have a safe work environment, or that we haven't come to a place where people can avoid those injuries in some way. Where are we sitting on that one compared to others? Is it?
So again, so so a couple of things that I'll say. So the mental health was the dominant contributor in 2024. Musculoskeletal and nervous system disorders followed. Again, this is all keeping with the industry as a whole. While the musculoskeletal was the lead in 2023, and mental health was the secondary contributor. So from a benchmarking perspective, we're very much on par. The majority of the musculoskeletal issues are with our long-term care home, right? So bends, lifts, all that sorts of stuff. It'd be great if they were in the room, but what I do understand is that there's significant work, training, capacity building that they do ongoingly in that area to ensure folks are using the right lifting techniques and so to mitigate and reduce those numbers. Yeah.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I had the average age highlighted as well, so glad to see that. I would just say we probably shouldn't, if we're talking about average age and benchmarking, we probably shouldn't say whether we're good or bad, because that would imply that younger or older is better than the inverse. So we should just say whether or not we're in line with the provincial average. But also, I did have a similar question about the $1,500 increase to mental health practitioner, which is great. I'm glad we did that. It probably, it won't cover one monthly appointment for an individual to see a therapist. Like it's not, it's great that we increased it. I think we could still do more, especially given that mental disorders has been our leading or second leading lost time. So, and did we start that January 1st, 2024? The increase?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, we started that in January 2024. Yeah.
Yeah, and I assume that we'll have a report back to see if, I'd like to see if that has changed significantly, the 26%, with the hope that if it has, we can agree to increase it to.
Yeah.
To me, that seems like an area where we can, with a little bit more,
Yeah.
see a big increase. So that was my only comment.
Yeah. Through you, Chair. It's that data point around the mental health piece is a pretty dynamic, multifaceted piece, and so there are a number of components that go into that one. Increased access to care, I think, is one of the variables that would assist that.
Yeah, I have a question, and that has to do with the municipal comparator. Not all municipalities are the same or do the same things. So there would be municipalities that do not have a social service aspect or a home aspect or other things like that. How is the comparison? Is there an adjustment for, shall we say, the fact that we're full range versus a local tier municipality that doesn't offer those services? We fall in the middle, or we're looking pretty good in terms of the municipal sector, but how do they define the municipal sector?
Good question. And so they're looking at so AGS is looking at municipalities of similar size and similar service provision. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Taylor? Councillor?
Yep, last one. So interested in the non-union recruitment piece, 2023 versus 2024. It's so skewed. It screams off the page. So the number of positions are the same, number reposted are the same, but the applications received are almost double, and the average days to fill the vacancy rate is almost double. And I'm just curious what if there's drivers of that and why.
So good question, through you, Chair. As we did some digging, because that number also jumped out to us as well, and so we didn't have a definitive answer to inform that. But what we think what happens there is in 2024 the labor market got a whole lot tighter, right? And so so there were more applicants across the board. So there were more applicants across the board from many organizations. It just got tighter for job seekers, and so that is what we also experience here. Now, with that in mind, not all of those applications for all of those job postings were for strong candidates, but increased just the same. So because all of our processes are manual, so if we have an increased volume, in applicants, that's just going to also impact the time, because all of our processes are very manual, very laborious. In 2026, hopefully that changes as we bring in the human resource information system. And the last thing that would have contributed to that increased number is that we expanded our promotion and advertising for jobs, and so that likely farther reach to entice applicants as well. Yeah.
Councillor Horner?
I'm on the same page, and you conducted over twice the number of interviews in that same period, how did you have the capacity to do twice the interviews?
Yeah. So good question, and so this is really a testament to our recruitment and selection staff. Generally speaking, if you check their schedules, they're usually bumper to bumper conducting interviews all day, every day. We did have the opportunity to have a summer student with us last year, and we're able to extend that summer student a little bit to also support us to try to get through the increased volume. But this is really a testament to our recruitment and selection team.
Thank you. Anything further? I have a motion then that the report of the Director of People and Equity, report People and Equity 2025-002, titled 2024 Human Resources Activity Report, dated March 27th, 2025, be received. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Mills. Any opposed? And that motion is carried. And the last report, that being the 2024 Staff Engagement Survey results. Rohan?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So the county conducted the 2024 staff engagement survey, and so it was a condensed version of the comprehensive equity audit that we did back in 2022. You know, as a good practice across organizations, it's always good to do these staff engagement surveys on a particular frequency, so you have a sense of how staff are doing, how the organization is doing, what we're doing well with, what we're not doing well with, to inform how we direct resources and our activities. And so really no different on this front. For a little bit more context, this staff engagement survey, we really wanted to take a look at all of the efforts and all of the energies that we had put into the organization responding to our staff engagement, our equity audit in 2022. We want to see, so we've done all of this work, so what? You know, have we had any impact? Have we had any changes? Are things the same? Have things gotten worse? And so what our data shows us on a couple of fronts that I think are important to point out. One was just even around the participation rate. In 2022, we had a participation rate in the equity audit at 46%. This time around, we had a participation rate at 56%. And so I think there's an indicator there that would suggest that there's greater engagement in the organization from staff across all departments. Additionally, what we'll see on a number of indicators, there has been, you know, increases, high single digits, so we're plus 9% on people believe that the culture of the organization has a positive impact on our work. We're plus 11% where folks feeling that we represent a diverse group of people. We're plus 12% around feeling that their job performance is evaluated fairly. We're plus 13% organizationally that people feel that people from all backgrounds have equitable advancement opportunities. So these are all really good things, and I think it validates all of the effort and the resources that we've been putting in to help make the organization a better place and a better experience for folks. There's always room for growth. And I think the other thing that I want to put into context here is that we did the equity audit in 2022. The equity strategy was completed and approved by council in the fall of 2023. And we conducted this audit in the fall of 2024. So this is really capturing a year or so of sustained work. And so that's not a long time, but in that short period of time, we've had some really positive outcomes. Across the organization, there's still opportunities for work, for improvement. And so we see some of the indicators were minus 8% on folks envisioning them working at the County of Dufferin in 2 years. We're minus 3% on folks thinking about looking for a job at another organization. We're minus 1% on transparent career advancement and promotion. And we had no movement on indicators indicators relating to leadership understands that diversity is critical to our future, and I feel my unique background and identity are valued at the County of Dufferin. So work to do there. What I also want to point to is in regard to Dufferin Oaks, and I think it's important to sort of mention Dufferin Oaks in this is because in 2022, when we conducted the equity audit, lots of challenges across the organization, but there were some more pronounced challenges at Dufferin Oaks. And so the Dufferin Oaks team, along with support from the People and Equity team, really got to work around, so what are we going to do around these pronounced results over at Dufferin Oaks? And I'm really pleased to say that there have been some significant improvements at Dufferin Oaks. And we see we are plus double digits across a number of indicators. And so we're plus 15% around people feeling that their performance is evaluated fairly. We are plus 15% on feeling safe around sharing feelings. We're plus 15% around work having a positive cultural impact at work. We're plus 14% on work-life balance. And we're plus 13% around equitable advancement and opportunities. So there's still work to do as well at Dufferin Oaks. And the only reason why we're mentioning Dufferin Oaks in this report is that we mentioned Dufferin Oaks in 2022. So we thought it was important to then also follow up and be able to indicate what has happened since. When we get the same exercise that we did in 2022, well, the exercise that we did in 2022 is we asked people a lot of questions, and we got back lots of data points, but we still needed to get a better understanding of exactly what that data meant. So we had deep dive conversations or town hall conversations in 2022 to get a better sense of what the numbers were saying to us, and that helped to inform the development of the equity strategic plan. So we're doing the exact same exercise here in 2025. So right now, the manager of equity is sitting beside me, Karima Sukdeo, and so Karima is really leading the process around leading the town hall conversations to get a better sense of what those 2024 data points really mean, so that we have more information or better information to then use and revise the equity strategic plan to be responsive to the new to the data. We're not done that process, but some of the preliminary sort of results that have come back or themes that have come back to us around some key data points that we're asking about. So the question around career advancement and promotion is transparent. We've heard a number of things. It's there in the report. I won't rhyme all of those off, but say the top three folks are saying increased opportunity for leadership development and training, opportunity for secondments and job training. Those are some of the shadowing. Those are some of the things that have come back in that data point. Around the data point around open and honest communication, folks have indicated it's important to have managers close the information loop. Folks want us to be able to reduce silos between departments, so there's better communication flow. So those are some of the pieces that have come back to us on that key data point. And the data point around I envision myself working at the county in Dufferin in 2 years. Some of the things that have come out in that is an opportunity for increased wages at other organizations. And I think that's really pronounced when we're thinking about hard to fill positions at the organization, and those opportunities externally. We have as in the HR activity report, we see that we have a number of folks who are eligible for retirement coming up in the near future. And folks also indicated that if you're looking for career advancement and such, from a municipal perspective, the county is a smaller organization. And so if that's a priority for you, then folks are open to looking for work at other organizations. So that's some of the preliminary. We have lots more work to do in these town halls, but the purpose of the town halls is to make better sense of what those data points are. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Horner?
My comment was going to be on exactly what you just talked about. And I guess I was trying to figure out too, is it the more long-term staff that you're getting that sense from, or the new staff? The younger folks tend to be a little more interested in several job employers over a time, where some of the senior staff like to stay in a place for a long period of time. So do you have any sense on that, Rohan, at all?
Yeah, great question through you, Chair. So from a disaggregated data perspective, we didn't get that level of disaggregated data to be able to break it down. How people responded to questions by an age variable, but what I will say to your question, your query there, is we know that generationally there's a different perspective on how folks see work, right? And so folks of older generations, I'll include myself in that, tend to stay at organizations longer. And as we get to younger generations, they don't look at work in that same kind of way. No.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you for the report. The review process and the employee engagement process, how many reviews do we get done in a year, like on a percentage basis? Are we at 100%, or is it much lower than that? And the employee engagement piece, it'd be similar. Like, I think it's great that the amount of people that did it went up. But maybe we'll just share from our organization. They don't track what you say. It's private in an employee engagement survey, but you must do it. You must be part of it, and you also must conduct a review. And the consequence is you don't get a raise if you don't do these things. Has the county ever considered doing that? And how do we make sure that we get more compliance? Is there processes in place to do that?
So through you, Chair, so just, around the first question, I just want to make sure, I'm not 100% sure when you say how often are the reviews done? Which reviews are you referring to?
Employee reviews. You're supposed to have an annual review with your manager.
Right,
Do we
right.
track how many are done, and what are the consequences for not doing one? And it's the same thing as the employee engagement process.
Right, yeah, so...
We're only at 57. How do we get that up? Like, it'd be great to get employee engagement higher on employee engagement processes.
Yeah, so great question. So we moved in the revised program, we moved from an annual performance review to having the performance review be 3 times a year. And our first year through the program, we are north of 80% sort of completion percentage on it. So we're about 86% or so completion the first year round. So there's been a high uptake and participation in that process. And so to your second question, I believe you were querying about whether or not we've considered the staff engagement surveys, making those mandatory. Yeah, so that has not been a discussion that has come up. From the consultants that we have worked with, that's never been something that's been put on the table. And so personally, for what my experience tells me, doing lots of community-based research, is that you want the best practices to ensure that it's voluntary, right? Because the voluntary aspect will give you a sense of how safe people feel from how safe people don't feel. And so if we begin to make these exercises mandatory and then align consequences for not participating in it, we may be sort of working at opposite directions around what we're trying to achieve. Now, we also have to think about some of the reasons in which folks don't complete the surveys, right? One of which is concern around anonymity and if there's going to be reprisal and all that sorts of stuff. I think that's important to know because that would then inform that there's more work to do around psychological safety in the organization. So what my professional experience would suggest to me, and there may be other opinions on that making these staff engagement surveys mandatory may be working at cross purposes.
Any other questions or comments? Then I have a motion that the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The key data points at the bottom where we're talking about the review, on mine, it's page, I guess it's the whole deck, but sorry, it's where it's key data point, open and honest communication, and it speaks to silos and keeping people in the loop, that sort of thing. I just think it ties nicely to what you're talking about the training processes that you're going to go over the next 3 years, and it feels like a lot of those they'll never be eliminated. Like, you can write that in any organization, but they'll be better as you train your people, because it will help enable making this better. This is never going to go away, but I just think I think it's interesting that that's there.
Yeah,
It's too bad it's there, but it's.
well, I think, you know, a couple of, so through you, Chair, and good observation. There are a couple of things that I'll say to that. One is that, you know, it's self-report, right? And so it's also people's perceptions. People's perception may or may not be accurate. Regardless, you still got to work with it. But I think it's just important to understand that the data that we're getting back here is self-report. Around that particular piece around closing the loop, so I just want to give credit to our communications team. So they do a lot of support and help around ensuring, you know, messaging, communicating the right things go out broadly across the organization. But they held a workshop a couple of weeks ago at Menorah Park Pavilion, and I believe it was all managers were at that training, and a lot of the key principles and the ideas that it was around community engagement framework, and a lot of the key principles and ideas that were presented in that workshop were very much transferable to work inside the organization. So, I say that just simply to say that there is ongoing support around supporting management, the organization, to address a number of these factors. And one of the pieces that we had most recently really does touch on this, the importance of closing the loop. Yeah. So I'm in full agreement with you.
Good. If there's no further questions or comments, I have a motion that the report of the Director of People and Equity, report People and Equity -2025 -005 2024 staff engagement survey results dated March 27th, 2025 be received. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Garrett's moves, seconded by Councillor Mills, or Councillor Solomon, I saw your hand go up as moving it, as seconding it. Thank you. Anything further on that? Any opposed? And that motion is carried. I don't believe we have any correspondence. We do have a notice of motion given at the last County Council meeting by Councillor White. Does anyone want me to read that? It simply goes on to the next council meeting for consideration. Any other notices of motion? So that brings us to any other new business. And I guess this is our last committee meeting ever, or until we go back to the future. It may be our last ever meeting. So thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for the great work that is presented to us. And I have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Garrett, seconded by Councillor Mills. Any opposition to that? Motion's carried. We are adjourned.